What's up, guys? It's Brian Wilson here, posting this video primarily for my students. We have made the switch to online learning, and I'm doing my best to, acclimate to the video slash online format. So I'm going to try to bring some of what I do in class, some of what I encourage my students to do, to YouTube, to Canvas, to wherever we end up uploading all this stuff. So I just figured I'd start a painting. Some of the stuff I've seen online, some challenges regarding, what are creatives up to? What are we doing to stay busy in these times? These interesting times where we've got all this time at home, even though as teachers and students we're still very busy. So I tried to take a little bit of time and start a painting. I figured, why not? Not only is it good for me to practice, but it's also good for my students to see some of the process, and show them. I like to show my students that I don't ask them to do anything I don't do. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. First off, materials. That's pretty much how anybody would start. This is sort of a crutch for me. This is a mahl stick, M-A-H-L. Just something to steady your hand. Do I use it all the time? No. But generally, like if I'm going in for some detail work, you lean it up here and you steady your hand, but that won't be anywhere near the beginning. I pretty much stay pretty loose at the start. I like to start off with Hog's Bristle brushes. If you can see, Hog's bristles are very white in complexion. I tell my students these are the work hogs that you use at the beginning of a painting. They help you spread paint. I don't care if you're using acrylic or oils. In the case of this piece, I'm gonna be doing oils. On that note, I'll show you a little bit of what I'm working with here. Some Charvan, which the text is probably backwards, but Charvan Extra Fine Artist Oils. I think you buy them exclusively through Jerry's Artarama. These are actually since I'm Jerry's artist, they've sent us some samples, some paints to play with, and so I figured why not demonstrate and use some of my Charvan oils. More specifically, what I'm using, Cad Yellow Deep, Green Earth, Cobalt Blue, Castle Earth, which is it's like a dark gray. I use this to mix up grays when I mix with titanium white. And of course, titanium white. I do have a couple of Williamsburg. I'm also part of the Golden family, so I like to shout out Williamsburg oils. For the sake of this demo, because of the color that's in my shirt, Persian Rose, and some Brilliant Yellow Pale. For my medium, when you're cleaning your brushes, or if you're thinning, the typical way to work with oils is thin to thick, or what they say, fat over lean. To get that thin or lean, that's where there's a little bit of medium mixed with the paint. In this case, I'm using Sansador, which is basically Winsor & Newton's answer to Gamsol. I use Gamsol. I like them both. I don't have a preference. It's just a matter of what I have on hand. In this case, Sansador. It's always good to have your palette knife handy. I always like a number 6. I think it's a number 6 palette knife. I don't like knives that are too fat, too wide or anything like that, too long. I don't like the long and skinny ones. It's a matter of preference. You need a box cutter to clean your palette, not just at the end. Obviously, I do clean my mixing space while when I'm done. But depending on my mix, whatever I'm mixing at the time, you might need to clean that off before you go in and mix. Like for instance, if you're mixing a lot of blues or greens, but then you're gonna make the jump to some warm colors, some oranges or what have you. You don't want that in the same space, contaminating your new mix. So you want to take some time, clean it off. So thus far, I've already started my initial gesture. This is what this is the gesture phase of the piece. I have my reference here, and I actually have a grayscale version. Bear with me, I'm using my phone. We're all adjusting, but here's the grayscale version. Let me try to focus there a little bit so you can see the comparison between the color version and the value version. And I'll be referring to this early on. I try to make sure that the value pattern, or think of it as a value composition, like how all the shapes of value are working in the space, and because sometimes the color can confuse you when you're starting off. So I took some time and did a very loose gesture. I didn't really measure anything yet. I don't like to get bogged down with a whole lot of lines. I don't know, there's just something with the way I work, the way I think. I can't really deal with a whole lot of angular stuff. I do a balance of line, straight line construction, and just gestural marks, and then I make the jump to massing in my general statements of value. And that's kind of what, right in this video, I'm just focusing on trying to block in, initial block-ins of my colors. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I like to work my way dark to light. So my darkest darks, obviously like in my hair area, the jeans. So I'm just gonna kind of block some of that in. Always try to use the biggest brush you can get away with. So in this case, this is like a number 10 flat. This is good for blocking in large areas. So I'm gonna grab, I've got a fair amount of medium on my brush. I don't want it too, you don't want it too wet. You don't want it, obviously you don't want to just barely dab it. So I want this sort of indigo type color that I have going on in the jeans. I think I mentioned cobalt blue, but I also use ultramarine. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. I'm gonna, especially because of how dark I'm going, I'm gonna get some ultramarine blue in there. A little of that Castle Earth. That's gonna kind of take some of the intensity out of the blue. Show you a range. Let me see if I can let you see what I'm working with there. So you see my mix. Hopefully that works. So there we go. Just trying to make sure that I don't start too intense. Some people will start off very intense, and then as layers add upon layers of paint, it will eventually get cooled off. Some people try to control intensity at the beginning, which is kind of what I try to do, and I will gradually add in more intense colors as I go on and refine. All right, just test that. I'm gonna add a little more. And I always test, make sure you test your colors before you just go all in. And these are the initial phases, so I'm not really, I like not having a whole lot of pressure when I'm starting off. I know a lot of people tend to be bogged down, and some students are just scared to put paint down. That's why I love working from very loose and gradually getting refined as you go. Like you can always put paint over paint, unless you're talking, well, I was gonna say watercolor, but there's a lot of layering in there too. Of course, with watercolor, you gotta be very careful. Nothing against watercolor. It takes a lot of discipline. See, I can just take the big brush and just start knocking it in. So far as drawing is concerned, the drawing phase never stops. I'm always going to start doing like proportion. I'll check for proportion as I'm doing this, and certainly as I move forward and after I get done with this phase. Because I already know there are a few areas where where I need to adjust some things, but I'll use my colors to push and pull boundaries and edges. So always, you never stop assessing. You never stop assessing. One thing that's kind of hard to do on camera is, I need to stand back and make adjustments. But that's very important. Always stand back. Another thing is important is to note is just because it's in the image, you always try to stage your images when you're preparing for a piece. You stage them best you can, but there'll inevitably be something that you need to change and adjust once you get to your painting. Remember, you're interpreting reality. We're not, as a painter, I'm one of those guys that's in the school of, we're not, our number one goal is not to simply record reality. We are, but as an artist, as soon as subject matter hits my eyes, I'm interpreting it. I'm a human being. So we interpret our reality. We interpret our surroundings, the world around us. So with that, you interpret your reference material to make sure it works for what your end result you have, the end result that you have in mind for the piece. Moving on to the chair. The chair actually has a similar blue, but it's a little more dull. So I'm adding a little more Castle Earth and Titanium White just to slightly lighten it to slightly gray what I had originally with the jeans. Test it. Remember the three pillars of color. You got hue, which is the name of the color. You got value, how light or dark it is, and then your chroma, or some people say intensity, saturation. Anytime you're mixing paint, you got to think of those three things. How light or dark do you want this thing to be? How light or dark is it compared to the surrounding things? How intense or chromatic do you want it to be, or how chromatic is it compared to the thing that's right next to it? And what's the hue? You start with what the right color is. That's pretty easy for anybody. Anybody that came out of kindergarten should know their colors, right? All right, there we go. There we go. So nice. You can see the difference here. See, that color is much grayer than what I showed you initially. Sorry, I have to keep moving the setup. I'll figure this out at one point. Just slightly smaller brush, tackle it here. In this case, I'm just going to use the Castle Earth and a little bit of the ultramarine blue, maybe a little bit of just a hint of the red, just to kind of make sure it's not a flat, dead, dark. But again, this is initial stages, no pressure. Just a little bit of the medium. There we go. Alright, so you can see how I'm starting out. I'm going to start knocking that in. Now, instead of you guys watching me do a lot of the boring work, I'll come back with a follow-up after I kind of knock in this initial, block in of the whole space, and I'll be back for the next video.